Good morning, homeschool mamas. This was very interesting to chat with you yesterday. I think there's some elements of what you shared about your communities, about how you show up in your communities, being authentic, how we feel or experience our communities this year, how we establish boundaries in our homeschools, or if we don't, or if we feel like we struggle with boundaries in the first place. All of these discussion points come from writing that I did because I personally experienced all of this through Brené Brown's books. Which one? Hard to say. So many and so much good content. And if you don't know her and you haven't read from her, I encourage you to do so. The source really of my book, Homeschool-Mama-Self-Care, it started with a discussion of boundaries, probably a number of years before that. But she really hit home a few ideas that I'd not considered before. But I'm going to talk more about all of these chat discussions on Wednesday. And we're going to talk about boundaries, authenticity, feeling connected, community, creating community, especially this year with so many things that feel they're definitely divisive, and just generally that feeling of how to deal with all of that stuff this year. So I share with you about recognizing that you're a separate person and trying to acknowledge that you're a separate person, not saying, hi, I'm a separate person, I want to be a separate person. You are a separate person, and because you are a separate person in your homeschool, your reality is that you need to show up as a separate person, and that's really tricky to do, but we're going to talk more about that on Wednesday. Hi. So that it was curious for me to learn about when you all talked about figuring out who you are and recognizing you have an identity outside of your homeschool mom identity, or recognizing when you needed to create boundaries in your homeschool. And it was actually after me. I was 30. I heard some responses that were definitely after 30. And I've heard that this is pretty typical for many women to experience a major awareness at about the age of 30. And how does that show up and how does that manifest in our homeschools? So this last week, I got to have a chat with Katie Corbett from Health, Wellness, and Chocolate on my podcast. And wow, that was so inspiring to hear her encourage me once again in how to engage eating. I think all of us could probably write our own nutrition classes. We know what the right thing is to do, and actually doing it is another thing. Like I said, I'm kind of fascinated by these veggie crisps, and I thought, great, because I love potato chips, and I could maybe fit in this veggie crisp instead. But it turns out veggie crisps are also potato starch and kind of addictive, even though they're a lot fewer calories, and it's still snack food. It's not necessarily brain food. It's mindless eating food for me. And she really challenged some ideas in how I should be engaging my eating, which was perfect timing because I started walking again. So 6 weeks of not really just moving around from chair to chair in the house means that I'm really tired of sitting. I really want to move. And so I've been able to move over the last week and really increase that over the last weekend. And that feels great, but then it compels me to say, okay, let's look at this eating thing again, how I'm eating. Not because of image, but because I don't feel good in here. And so our goal is to fuel our brains. And so she has some very interesting approaches. She lost 60 pounds herself, and she did not do any big program, or she didn't follow a specific diet or anything like that. It was with one question, and it is pretty much the same question that I engage in my homeschool world in how am I feeling and why am I feeling what I'm feeling, and how that can actually address our dietary challenges and how we show up to actually enabling our body to be healthy. So I encourage you to listen to that. Just as an aside, I have a Homeschool Mama retreat course coming out. I wish that I could have it at my house. It would be so much fun to have it here, and I do intend to actually do that at some point. My bed and breakfast won't be open likely again this year, but when it is, I would love to create maybe a few weekends in the summer and where we could actually meet together here. It is such a peaceful place to live. I'm so grateful for it. I've called it Giverny of the Mountains because I have a fascination with Claude Monet, and his gardens in France are called Giverny. And I love the blues and the greens and all that stuff. So that's what I've named my bed and breakfast. But I want to turn it into a real retreat where you can actually see my baby chicks and my baby goats and, canoe and hike and just relax here. But also chat about all things homeschool and more importantly, how we're showing up in our homeschooling and what we can do to equip ourselves so that we can show up in the way that we want to. But until then, I'm going to release a course called Homeschool Mama Retreat, and you can enjoy it in the comforts of your own home. And though I say that kind of jokingly because we are all kind of done with our own home, it will definitely bring you, I hope that it will bring you a sense of an awareness of how you want to show up, maybe release a few things from what your expectations were, also bring you a sense of, okay, I can do this, and here are the tools that I need to use in order for me to feel really good in this scenario and actually enjoy showing up every morning. Well, most mornings, because nobody enjoys showing up every morning. That's not your reality or anybody's reality. So I am going to release that in the next few weeks. But, last week I told you that I was bringing home 10 chicks, and I was a whole month early. My son was so disappointed. He set up the whole brooder, has everything set up in our greenhouse, which really is our homeschool room. And there are, hundreds of seedlings in there. I've gone to a greenhouse, bought a bunch of plants that I was intending to do for the landscaping this year. And then it's just absolutely Hawaii climate. It's very humid in there with a ton of books. So I'm not sure that that's a good idea. But my homeschool room turned greenhouse turned chick brooder is going to have to wait a month because I get 10 chicks on May 12th and 4 chicks in June. So it's going to be a little bit. But in the meantime, my husband and my two of my kids are working on the goat barn outside. It stayed up even despite the huge windstorm last night. And I'm just going to answer that. And it stayed up despite the very huge windstorm last night. We watched the trees, 200-foot trees swaying in the wind, praying that they wouldn't land on our house because that was a challenge, or that was an issue for people in the area yesterday. And I thought about it. That is kind of us this last year. We feel like, sure, we've got all these tools, we've got all these principles for staying strong despite the challenges, but it feels sometimes like we're seriously swaying in the wind. And so I'm hoping to address some of those challenges on Wednesday. So goats, we're going to be doing some goats. And I also wanted to share with you the 2 books that we're reading this week, because I would like to have a monthly book club if people want to join. And we could talk about the books that we're reading with our kids, the books that we're reading are independently. And one of the books that Zach and I started this last week was this one. It's a Canadian book called Aurora of the Yukon, A Girl's Adventure in the Klondike Gold Rush by it's a journal. It's actually her, I forget what her last name is. It says in here, but she's actually, a 9-year-old girl who travels from Quebec all the way up to the Klondike Gold Rush back in the 1898. Is that right? It's very interesting, very interesting. She meets some very significant people that we learn about in the Gold Rush. I love reading this story, and as an aside, there's also journal entries of her great-granddaughter as a 9-year-old traveling in 2006 up to the Arctic as well. I love reading this with him. Actually, my oldest daughter also joins in when she's here. And I was going to say, this year has been a year without a lot of extracurricular activities, said most people. And yet I have my youngest son who's practicing piano just for fun because he has that spare time. And I realized that both my husband, who had piano lessons, and my second daughter, who also had a lot of piano lessons, regularly show him stuff on the piano. And then he practices every single day, if not a bunch of times a day. And I thought, wow, this is actually piano practice. It's legit practice. And so in the meantime, we're also reading this book, Music of the Great Composers, A Listener's Guide to the Best of Classical Music by Patrick Kavanagh. This one I definitely heard about through a curriculum fair at some point, and I do really find it very interesting myself because it's one of my interests is music of the great composers. I'd like to call it classics, but that's really only one era of classical music. But I really enjoy that, and that's something that I'm doing with my son right now. So I think that is, well, except that I want to say that if you want to have a discussion about all these things that we're talking about this week, about boundaries and authenticity and how you're showing up and community and whether you're feeling connected, let's talk about it. You're definitely welcome to throw comments down below. I'm happy to address questions as they come up on Wednesday. And also I'm happy to hear your thoughts, your comments on anything that I'm saying on Wednesday. I first and foremost want this to be an authentic and vulnerable community. I want it to reflect really our core desires, because I think that's exactly what we want, is we want to feel understood, we want to feel supported, and we definitely need to do that being authentic, and we only can do it if we're being vulnerable. So don't speak or say anything that you don't feel is comfortable or you wouldn't want to share with everybody. 100% I want to encourage genuine authenticity, not trying to hotwire a relationship that's just not real, even between us. I share things openly. I share things probably sometimes a little bit too much, but I really would sit with my cup of tea and chat with you about these real things, because I know that when we're getting real with each other, that is the point at which we can actually connect, or we can actually encourage each other. So if you want to have a conversation about any of the things we talk about, jump on over to the Homeschool Mama support group on the Facebook page. And I don't have a PDF that is related to this, but I do in the course, in the Homeschool Mama retreat that I'm going to release soon. But I think the discussion of boundaries, how do I not have a PDF on that one? How do I not have an entire seminar already recorded for that one? I'm not sure, because that one is, to me, as a grown woman that has had to figure out a bunch of stuff, that is the biggest foundation point to pretty much everything that I've learned, is boundaries around my separateness, not just around my homeschool day, although that has a place and that is definitely necessary. So come on over to the Homeschool Mama support group and let's chat about all these different things. And I will put together some sort of PDF, a reminder sheet this week about how to engage boundaries or community. You tell me which is the most important to you. And I think that covers what I wanted to chat with you about, except this one thing. Rather than focusing on all the things this last year that are difficult, because there's a few, I have learned that one of the things, very random but very, very true things that I have gained from this year is the ability to cook things that I would normally only get in takeout, because obviously I'm not doing takeout as often and I'm not getting out as often and novelty is not as frequent. But right now I think I mastered the fine art of butter chicken and a hot pot, which I was introduced to only this last year, and the kids really like it. I think it's just like Chinese soup, but anyways, it's fabulous and I love it. And the butter chicken thing, I mean, yum. So anyways, if you want a recipe or if you want ideas for that, you're welcome to ask me about that too. Okay, so I hope that you and your kids have a good week, and jump on and let me know what you're thinking. I'm willing to listen to whatever thoughts, whether completely opposite of what I'm thinking or something outside the realm of what I was even talking about. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I hope that you and your kids have a good week.